Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Melissa Gerson. I am a psychotherapist and the clinical director of Columbus Park, which is an outpatient treatment center in Manhattan. And I'm also the founder and the clinical director of My Three Square, which is the platform that we're using today to join together for lunch and for conversation. The series is called Meet and Eat Together. And our effort here is to create a support network for folks out there who may be struggling with eating their lunches, and also an opportunity to bring friends and colleagues together to share their messages, to share their skills, to share their stories, in the hopes that we can create a real platform that's motivating and inspiring and helpful. So today, my guest is Grace Patterson. She's the Chief Programs Officer at Project HEAL. Project HEAL, many of you may know about it already, but it's a nonprofit that's focused on access to healing for all people with eating disorders. And so today we're going to learn more about Project HEAL as we learn about Grace's role there specifically, and also to get to know Grace a bit because she has a lot of interesting stories and experiences that I think might be helpful for everybody to hear. So the structure today is going to be a meal with a similar structure to what we do in a treatment setting. So if you have any friends or people in your life that you think might benefit from this hour, please feel free to tag them or wave to them or invite them, whatever it may be, because the more the merrier. On that note, also to let you know that I have a chat box opened here. So if anybody has questions throughout, I'll do my best to field questions as I eat, as I talk, as I hang out with Grace, a lot of multitasking. So as we jump into our meal, I'm going to share the basic structure of a treatment center meal with you. We always start with checking in about the actual meal that we brought for the day. And in an outpatient setting, that is, the meals are brought by the individual participants. So that gives them the opportunity to practice putting together a meal, portioning the meal, selecting meal items, plating it, and then completing the meal together. And it gives us a chance to give some feedback. Now, obviously in this format, we can't give feedback, but hope that the meals that we brought are some examples of some meals that you could do at home. And we'll share also how we went about choosing the meals, because that process can be difficult for many people. So I'm going to start with my meal, and then Drew, and then Grace, you'll share yours.
Sure.
I actually cooked. I'm not a very good cook at all, but I cooked last night, and I made this lentil soup, which actually it turned out to be more of a stew, I guess, because it's not very soupy, and it kind of looks like cement, but I ate it last night and it actually tastes very good. So I'm looking forward to this meal, even though it doesn't look so beautiful. And then I also made some cornbread out of a box, but it actually came out great. I used a box mix. So I chose this meal because obviously it was in the house and it was convenient to me because I had it last night and there was leftovers. And right now for all of us, it's a time where it's a bit harder to get food. So I'm trying to use up my current meals, my leftovers. The way that I portioned it was just by my gut instinct. I didn't use a measuring cup or any kind of measurement. I just, I have these bowls. I kind of know from repeated experience just about what a serving of soup would look like for me. So I almost filled the bowl probably about 3/4 of the way. And then I just helped myself to about a palm size piece of cornbread. Now this hungry afterwards, my body. I know that I won't finish this meal feeling overly full because I don't think the meal. Can you hear me? It looks like it. Uh-oh.
Sorry, Melissa, you were breaking up a little bit.
No, you froze. Yeah.
Am I back?
Perfect. It's on now. Hi, Grace.
Hi.
You're back.
Great.
Hi.
Do you want to hear about my lunch?
Yes, we want to hear about your lunch.
Brilliant. I can't tilt my video down because I'm on a desktop, but I can tilt up to you. So I have a sandwich with lots of extra sharp cheddar cheese and a hard-boiled egg because I ran out of lunch meat, and some chips and some apple. And then I also have a brownie that I made out of a box.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Most of the time when I'm thinking about what to eat, I really just try to sort of close my eyes and think about what I actually feel hungry for. And today it was absolutely a sandwich. And then I sort of, or if I can't figure out in my insides, I'll go and look at my fridge and see what sort of moves me. And I can't tell you how excited I am for a nice
Yeah,
sandwich
great. Awesome. Yeah, I think that brings up a point. When you're trying to figure out what to have and you're trying to get in touch with your intuition and your gut and your cravings. Sometimes I know I practice this with my kids, so I'm going to bring it up as helpful because I'm trying to, when you have children, when you're a child, you're trying to learn how to connect with your needs and your desires. And so sometimes I'll say, if they ask for a snack, I'll say, do you want something salty or something sweet? And so that can be kind of a good place to start with your lunch. Are you in the mood for something salty, something sweet? Do you feel like you would enjoy something hot or something cold? Like today, I was feeling kind of cold. I was feeling like I wanted something more comforting. So the idea of something, a warm soup or a stew, kind of felt more appealing to me. And I wasn't unsure about, salty or sweet. So I kind of did them both by having the cornbread with the soup, which is kind of salty. So, it's often helpful in the early stages of really getting in touch with your desires and your cravings to ask yourself some questions like temperature, texture. Are you feeling crunchy? Do you feel like something soft, liquid versus solid, salty versus sweet, sour, bitter, kind of trying to remind yourself of the different flavors and textures out there. And in that moment, can you connect with one that might feel most appealing? So
Yeah, totally. I also, particularly sort of earlier in recovery, I've been recovered now for 8 years. But earlier in my process, it also helped me to think about like how I wanted the food to make me feel. So like fresh or warm or nourished or whatever it was, I can sort of associate foods with the feelings that I wanted to feel as a result. And I found that really, really helpful.
So great. I love that strategy. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So after in a treatment setting, after we check in about the meal, we usually set an intention, and an intention is just something that you're going to be thinking about or working on during the meal. So when I say working on it, it can be some work in the moment to try to access certain skills, to try to turn your thoughts to the conversation so that you're turning away from some chatter or negative thoughts or judgments that might be coming up. That it's usually, for many people, that's a hard process, but that can be something to work on in the meal. You might want to work on pacing. Are you trying to kind of speed up or slow down your pacing? If that's something that you're working on, we can work on that today together. I'm going to be keeping a pretty steady pace. And if you'd like to refer to me as you're eating, that's a reasonable thing to do. So when we set the intention, again, we're thinking about what we're going to be considering for today. If you're feeling stuck on an idea of what to talk about or what to think about today, one thing that we often do, and what many people in the center choose, is distraction, and they use the meal conversation as their distraction. I think that's the number one strategy that folks go to when they're eating, because rather than eating mindfully, which is certainly something to work on at certain stages of the process, actually eating with distraction can be really helpful because you're less likely to experience some of those anxious thoughts or judgments that could actually get in the way of completing your meal. So feel free, if you'd like today, to just keep turning your mind to the conversation that Grace and I are having, and try to keep up with the pacing of the meal. So after we set an intention, we usually begin to eat the meal. What we'll do is I'm going to set a little timer, and this timer is going to keep us completing our meal within 30 minutes, which is, we figured, just kind of a reasonable amount of time to spend on eating a meal. It allows you to be able to eat within a time frame that can keep you in your life, so it's not taking super long and getting in the way of your work or your school life. So we're going to work toward completing within 30 minutes. I'm going to let you know when we're halfway through, and then I'm going to try to give you a note when we're 5 minutes up. So we all can start eating. Grace, you'll do the best you can. You're going to be talking more than me, so don't worry if you may have to finish the rest of your lunch afterwards. But I think the very first thing I'd love to hear from you is, for you first, this is Project HEAL Week at Meet and Eat Together. So throughout the week, we're going to have different representatives of Project HEAL on our program. And so you're the very first. So I'm going to ask if you could tell us a bit about Project HEAL, the mission, and more concretely, what Project HEAL offers to people.
Absolutely. So Melissa said this at the beginning, but our mission is to support folks with access to healing for all people with eating disorders. So for us, we know a couple of things. One is that clinical treatment is life-saving, and that lots of people don't have access to it. So we offer a grant program that provides grants of either in-kind treatment or sort of travel expenses or things like that for clinical treatment, everything from residential to outpatient care, depending on what's most appropriate for folks. So we run that grant cycle every single month, and every single month there is an opportunity to apply if folks are really in need of treatment and for whatever reason can't afford it or aren't able to access it. So that's one part. But we also know that treatment is only sort of one piece of the puzzle, right? Many of us on staff are recovered ourselves or have been eating disorder therapists or are eating disorder therapists or some combination of those things. And I think we know firsthand that, without sort of community and ongoing support, not just from a therapist, but from friends and family and other kinds of carers, recovery just isn't possible in the way that we want it to be for everybody. So we also run a peer support program and offer one-on-one mentorship that happens online on a video call like this. And also support groups, which pre-coronavirus happened in person, but are now happening online.
Oh, how nice.
Yeah.
And so your role in particular within Project HEAL, can you expand on that?
Yeah, sure. I'm our chief programs officer. So what that means is that I sort of hold the overarching vision for all of the programs and making sure that they fit nicely together, and thinking about sort of how we engage volunteers, how we make sure that folks who get our treatment grants are getting connected to the peer support that we offer also. So I really sort of think about the big picture of all of our programs.
And what brought you to Project HEAL in the first place? I know you've been there for years.
I have, yeah. I was, before this, I was working in international development, working on community development projects, mostly in Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. And it was a tiny organization. I wanted to do more, and the organization didn't need another sort of leader. What they needed was folks getting the work done. So it just sort of became time for me to move on. And so I entered a process of a lot of soul searching about what I wanted to do next. And when I found the job description for, at the time, developing the Communities of Healing program, which didn't existed only in a very small way before I came to Project HEAL, it just felt right? I had done a bunch of program development beforehand and a lot of training and facilitation. So to get to build a new program was exciting. And then also, as a recovered person myself, I feel really clear that being in relationship with other people who understood my brain saved my life. And so to get to build a program almost from scratch, and also to do it for a community that means a lot to me, and that I have experienced as life-saving, just felt like exactly the right next step.
Yeah, that was like some sort of divine intervention, really.
Totally.
Switching gears a little bit, you mentioned your own recovery, and many of our guests on this program have their own recovery stories. And I think it's really helpful and interesting to hear for people out there who might not be there yet, to hear about, what were some turning points for you, or what were certain factors that really helped you to get well?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest was that I jumped around a lot. It took me a while to finish college. So I was at one institution and then at a community college, and finally ended up at a 4-year school. And when I moved in, there was somebody in my brand new roommate's bed who did not look like my brand new roommate. My new roommate and I had sort of been friends on Facebook beforehand. And she was napping, and so I sort of tiptoed around her. And when she, oh, sorry, did I lose you?
For 1 second.
Okay.
You lost you at, there was somebody in your roommate's bed who wasn't your roommate.
Yeah. Yeah, she was a brunette and my roommate was a redhead.
Okay.
So when she woke up, I sort of introduced myself and she introduced herself as Netta, that my roommate's friend from a summer program. And we spent a bunch of the day together. And I just sort of noticed things that I recognized, right? Like, you know, when we talked about going out for dumplings, she like looked a little bit nervous, sort of all the roommates in the suite. And, you know, she slept a lot of the day and looked pretty tired. And something just sort of clicked for me. I was like, oh, I know you. I am you. And we sort of went for dumplings. And on the way back, I just sort of hung back and said to her, you know, sometimes food is hard, and something as simple as dumplings can feel really hard for me. And I just like watched this look of relief come over her. And we talked on the way home about sort of the things that we had in common. And I learned later that, you know, she texted my roommate and said, your new roommate is one of us.
Wow.
And meeting Katie, who was my college roommate, was an incredible turning point. Just like being able to recognize sameness in each other and just hold each other accountable for nourishing ourselves, both physically in terms of food and also in terms of spirit, was an incredibly powerful experience. Until really recently, you know, she and I have been friends for almost a decade. And until really recently, she lived, you know, a 6-minute walk away from me here in New York City. And we're still incredibly close and still do that, sort of holding each other accountable and making each other laugh, and having a lot of compassion for each other's experience. I feel very clear that I wouldn't be here today were it not.
I think I can see why you're so committed to what you're doing at Project HEAL, because so much of what you're doing is about creating connection, obviously the support and the accountability that go with it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we've had a number of people again on this program who have their own recovery stories. And I would say that's one common thread that I'm hearing is that, I mean, I think there are two things that I'm hearing the most. One is that, you know, connection, allowing people to help, to support, just that contact with other people. That's a huge piece of this, of recovery. And then I think also, and I'm wondering how much this was your experience, but also focusing in on some other kind of purpose or something that felt important or life enhancing outside of the disorder. Did you have an experience like that as well, that something became more important at a certain point than your eating disorder?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I was always really invested, have always been really invested in trying to make a sort of meaningful impact on the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I chose recovery initially for myself because I wanted to survive and I wanted to feel joy again. But I do think that over time, you know, as I became more capable of being a good friend and being a good partner and being a good daughter, sister, it was really rewarding to be able to support other people. And so I think I spent a lot of time sort of sorting out how exactly I was going to do that, and ended up in the nonprofit world, ended up in the NGO world. I think that's absolutely been meaningful to recovery. It continues to be sort of reminding myself that if I don't care for myself in lots of ways, right? Like get enough alone time, get enough downtime, get enough food to nourish me, that I won't be capable of being useful to anybody else. Is always a helpful reminder for me that like this is the thing that I do to fill my own well. So
in treatment, we call that like reducing vulnerabilities. we call it reducing vulnerabilities, so you're doing all the things that are important to you to take care of yourself. So you reduce your vulnerability to relapse or to struggle or to low mood or changes in mood, like the rest, the nutrition, the time out for yourself kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
Can you, based on your treatment experience, were there any experiences that you had around accessing treatment or accessing the right treatment that impacted your work today? Any challenges that you had? I mean, I'm sure that many viewers have had their own difficulties getting what they need from treatment for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
Is that personal to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I was very broke when I decided I wanted recovery. I was barely paying for college, with lots of student loans and multiple jobs. I was incredibly busy. I was incredibly broke. I was really lucky to be in a higher education institution where I could get some free therapy. And I was really lucky to be in relationship with a person who had just come out of intensive residential treatment.
Yeah.
Who just had a lot of skills and had a lot of language that I didn't have access to beforehand. And that was totally life-changing. But it might have been a different story if I had had that community earlier, or had access to really consistent and specialized eating disorder treatment. It might have taken me less time to decide to choose recovery, and to really fight for it. Yeah, I can't say how lucky I feel to have had the resources that I had and for them to have worked. Everybody's eating disorder is different, and lots of people, those things don't work for, and don't have access to even those things. And so the treatment access program for me is about, making sure that as many people as possible have the resources to recover, because I very easily could not have, and the resources I have could very easily have not worked, and it's all luck.
So then can you elaborate if there's anybody who's listening right now that's having a difficult time gaining access, for a variety of reasons, whether it's financial or location or other circumstances, where can they begin?
Yeah. Well, the treatment access program is very simple on our website. Our website is theprojechtheal.org, and you can click treatment access program and it'll answer all of your questions. Essentially, the way that it works is that folks apply for a grant, and we review applications every month based on a bunch of criteria like financial need, clinical appropriateness for the resources that we have to give, various ways in which folks might have been marginalized in the treatment landscape around race or gender. So we look at a bunch of stuff, and award grants for treatment at the appropriate level of care. So for some people that looks like residential, for some people that looks like an intensive outpatient program, for lots of people that looks like outpatient dietitian and therapy. And whenever possible, we try to connect folks to members of our healers circle, incredible eating disorder specialized clinicians who volunteer their time and donate treatment in kind, which is incredible. But when that's not possible, or when we don't have a healer who's physically in the same area, sometimes we'll connect folks to teletherapy. We get a lot of grant applications from people who don't have an eating disorder specialized therapist in a 15-mile radius.
Yeah.
Which is true for a lot of this country. And so often we'll connect folks to teletherapy because we really believe that eating disorders are a unique and tricky thing. And so we want someone to be able to be served by a clinician who really knows what they're working with. And occasionally we will sort of recruit new providers in somebody's area if we really need that. So once someone is one of our grant recipients, they get a case manager from us, who really helps make sure that we're seeing people through all the levels of care that feel appropriate.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm just going to take this pause to, perfect timing, to note that we're about 15 minutes into the meal. So I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes and let folks know when we have 5 minutes left of the eating experience. You mentioned a few minutes ago, referencing those in our community who have had experience where they've experienced being either marginalized, I guess, members of our community. And I know that you have some unique thoughts on that, or some of your own personal thoughts about that experience. And I'm wondering if you could speak a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be very real. The stereotype of an eating disorder sufferer is a young, thin, wealthy, white woman, cisgender woman. That's not who gets eating disorders, right? Folks get eating disorders regardless of race or ethnicity in similar rates. And in fact, the rates of, I think, binge eating disorder are higher in some communities of color. It happens regardless of age. A full third of sufferers are male, right? So we just know that that stereotype is not true. But it persists for a lot of reasons. And I think in part because often eating disorder treatment is marketed to that audience. And so when we see sort of representations of, treatment centers or who treatment is for, the images we see are that person, that stereotype. And so I think there's a way in which, for lots of us, looking at those images, we get the clear message that eating disorders don't happen to people like you. If you don't look like this, you don't have an eating disorder. And certainly this treatment program is not for you. That's sort of more insidious for me as a queer person, and as a person from a sort of mixed class background. It's not quite the same sort of visible thing, but I sometimes walked into recovery spaces and everybody's talking about where they went to college and their last, international vacation.
Right.
And I had never left the country before I was 22 years old. And only then because somebody paid me to work overseas. So that kind of thing is really, really alienating as a person who doesn't come from an owning class background. And the same sort of thing is true. Queer communities have, my own queer community and queer communities in general have different standards of beauty and different ways of thinking about what is beautiful and attractive. And so often, again, I walk into recovery space and hear folks talking about the beauty ideal as if there's only one, and it's the one for straight people. And so I think the ways in which folks are marginalized in our world and in our life get exacerbated in the context of recovery space, where the real message turns out to be, we welcome everyone, but actually this probably isn't for you because literally nobody here is going to have this experience. So Project HEAL is we have worked really hard to make sure that is less and less the case every single day. We do a lot of training for our group facilitators and our mentors around thinking in that way, and sort of undoing the assumptions that we have about who's going to show up in the room or how they grew up or how they identify. And we do a lot of work in the context of the treatment access program to make sure that we're factoring in things like, somebody may not have realized that they had an eating disorder for an extra long time because their community didn't recognize it. So we work really hard to sort of work against those stereotypes and to factor in sort of various kinds of marginalization.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's really amazing. Can you share with us a bit more now about what recovery really looks like for somebody who's living, breathing in recovery?
Yeah.
Many people ask, is it really possible? Is there a place where you can actually get to where you're not thinking and worrying about food or weight?
Yeah, I love this question, Melissa. I really do. I love answering it. Um, recovery is worth it, right? Like that is the simplest thing that I can say. At this point this year, I will have been recovered. I'm recovered for longer than I was sick, and I'm incredibly proud. But I know, doing this work, I have met hundreds of recovered people, people who were sick for a couple of years, people who were sick for several decades. And every single person, even if they struggled for a really long time or really severely, or it took them forever to feel fully recovered, not a single person has ever told me it wasn't worth it, ever.
Yeah.
And so I think that's important to remember, like your recovery is not going to look like mine. But every single recovered person I met has said that it's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for me, recovered feels like I get to feel joy again. I was so miserably unhappy. And just all I could think about was food. And now food is sort of like one piece of my life and of my day. Sometimes a source of joy, sometimes a thing that I like need in order to be able to do the next thing. But it's just it's one small piece. I like my relationships with people are way more important. When I was really in my eating disorder, I think this is true for a lot of folks. Going to a restaurant or going out to a meal with friends was a true nightmare. Like not knowing what was going to feel safe, like feeling observed, not knowing how I was going to feel, and whether or not people were going to get worried or what was going to happen. It was just a circle of hell. And now that we're in quarantine, as a recovered person, I had a dream the other night about going out to a fancy meal and like enjoying several courses of food. That's a whole different world, right?
Yeah.
That said, it doesn't mean that when you're recovered, you like never have another negative thought about yourself ever again. That's unrealistic. I am a human woman in this world.
Yeah.
Of course, there are still going to be moments where I don't absolutely unconditionally love every single thing about my appearance. But I think the difference is that when I was sick, having a negative self-thought would send me into a 3-week long spiral of restriction and real misery. And now I have a negative self-thought and I go, ooh, what was that? What's going on with me that made me feel that way?
Yeah.
And I'm able to recognize it immediately and like take care of myself in the way that I need to. And I don't remember 2 days later that I had that thought. And I think that, part of what's hard about recovery is that it takes years and years of practice for that to be like something that you do without a second thought, and sort of instinctive. I like to talk about it like it's like learning to play the violin, right? At first you're terrible and it sounds awful and nobody wants to hear you play even hot cross buns. But if you practice every single day for several years, you can only improve. You can only improve with every subsequent day. So, where 8 years ago, I had to fight really hard to think about, okay, how do I combat that thought? How do I tell myself a good story or say a nice thing about myself to balance out the negative thing? I had to fight so hard that first year, especially. And now I don't even think twice. It's not even a proactive decision. I just like have a thought, I respond to it and I care for it. And I move on with my day and my life.
So it's like a muscle memory.
Exactly.
Yeah, it gets into your system like muscle memory.
Totally. Yeah.
Can you speak to, I think many people who think about recovery fear being unable to come to terms with their bodies or to accept their bodies as recovered. Can you speak to that experience? Because I think that oftentimes people will say like, I want to get better. I want to stop the torture around food, but I just can't accept my body as it wants to be naturally.
Can I curse on this program?
Sure, why not? Yeah, there's no rules here. Yeah.
Okay. If you had told me when I was really sick that this is the body that I was going to get, I would have, in recovery, I would have said, fuck you, I'd rather die. Right?
No other word would have been appropriate in that moment, by the way. So thank you.
No, that's exactly what I would have said.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt. I felt really strongly. Like if you had told me this was the body I was going to get, I would have preferred to die. All I can say is that it's worth it now, right? Like I still don't, unconditionally every day wake up really loving my body.
Yeah.
But being in this body means that I get to do this incredible work with Project HEAL. It means that I get to have wonderful, loving relationships. It means that I get to feel joy in my day-to-day life, and be delighted by the world around me. Like all of those things are just so much more important.
Well said.
Look.
That's really profound, Grace. Thank you for sharing that.
You got it.
I think that's so well said, that you share that perspective, that transformation, because I think so many people think that, I think most people want loving relationships and meaningful career pursuits. These are things that who doesn't want that? But I think many people, when they're stuck in the illness, think the only pathway to get there is through food and body control. So it's really just, I think that what you're sharing is just punctuating that's misguided, actually, that the only way there is through like acceptance, and turning the mind to what you want instead of waiting for some kind of concept of ideal that should somehow fuel your confidence and your belief in yourself and then serve as the launch pad for life,
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to name too that like I am fortunate to conform in some ways to a beauty ideal in my natural body. But the people that I work with and the people that I know who are recovered, who have recovered in higher weight bodies also feel this way, right? Like it is true that the world treats people in higher weight bodies really badly. And the folks I know who deal with that treatment on a daily basis still think recovery is worth it.
I appreciate that. I really do, Grace. Thank you so much.
You got it.
So we finished the actual eating portion of our meal, except for Grace, who's going to be able to continue. So, at the end of the meal, what we'll do is we'll look around, we'll make sure everybody has finished. I completed my meal. I was a little embarrassed to lick up the crumbs of the cornbread, although I really wanted to because it was really good. So probably when the camera goes away, I'm gonna eat that because it was delicious. And I would say we always check in on how we're feeling physically, and I feel very comfortably full. Like I think this meal helped me to feel energized, and it warmed me up, and it felt comforting and tasty. So I feel really satisfied. What we'll also do at the end of the meal is check in on how we're feeling. And oftentimes people are struggling after meal, although I notice very clearly that the more folks engage in the conversation or in this experience, listening and really being present, I always notice that folks will say, I feel better than I would have expected. I'm having some thoughts, but I enjoyed the experience because we were in conversation, and that was engaging for me. So, it's worth checking in on how you're feeling. What we also do in the center is that after we check in about what we're feeling, we actually move on pretty quickly, because the goal that we have really is to be able to eat and run, to be able to eat your meal and move on to your life without feeling, flooded with emotion or feel that you're unraveling. So usually we focus on a cope ahead plan, or just planning out the rest of the day, and really more specifically what we're going to do to stay healthy, to stay mentally healthy, to stay in line with what we're working on. And so this week we're going to, with it being Project HEAL week, I'm hoping that people will join back for the next couple of days, because I'm going to try to move through an intervention this week And the first part of the intervention is something I've spoken about before. It's some material from acceptance and commitment therapy, which is a behavioral therapy that has a lot of science and research behind it as a treatment method, actually, for a number of different conditions. Eating disorders being one of them, and interestingly, pain being another. So, thinking about how people who struggle with pain, unfortunately, in many cases, they have to learn how to live with pain. And in a way, it's sort of like we can think about that as emotional pain too. Sometimes we're unable to change the circumstances of our lives or certain realities that are painful. And so ACT treatment is about how we don't erase pain or like make it go away or pretend it's not there, or not to really believe in it. We actually accept that it's there, but we still act in line with what's important to us so we can have a full life. So today I'm going to be talking about values, and I'm going to do a screen share at a certain point. But first, I want to do an exercise with everybody, and this exercise is one that really helps people connect with value and what's important to them. And the reason, again, I feel this is super important, especially after the last few weeks, speaking with so many people really in full recovery. The stories again and again share how the people share how they really move through recovery by connecting with things outside of body, food, and weight that are important and meaningful to them. So that there is transformation. There's some kind of transformation that occurs when people can open their worlds to other things that are going to bring positive experiences and meaning to their lives. And so the step to get there is by first and foremost connecting with what's important to you individually. And so I want you to take a moment and imagine it's your 80th birthday. So you're thinking ahead to the future, perhaps, unless, this may be far away for some and maybe closer to others. But to think about, imagine it's your 80th birthday, and at your party, there are all kinds of people who have been involved in your life throughout your entire life. So people that you knew from growing up, people that maybe aren't even here yet. Like, let's say you end up having children, they're grown children at this point, and they're there with you. Teachers, mentors, colleagues, everybody is there to celebrate you. And I want you to really think about what do you want these people to be saying about you and what you stood for and what your life meant to them. And when you think about that, it's always interesting when I do this exercise with people, because it's very rare that the first thing that comes up is anything appearance or weight related. Usually people say, well, I want to hear that I was like a really present, loving, devoted, friend, that I was someone who could be counted on, that I was someone who, was a positive influence for people. Maybe people will say, I want to know that I worked hard, that I was passionate about something, that I shared my passions with people. So really trying to dig down deep into who you are and who you want to be. And it may, the important thing about selecting values is that you can actually select them. They don't have to be there already. You can pick and choose your values. So today you can decide to choose a new one. And you can think about values based on different parts of your life. So for example, I may have certain values as a parent, of the kind of parent that I want to be. I have different values around the kind of therapist that I want to be. I have different values about who I am in my community, as a daughter. I have a separate set of values. I have values also in terms of how I personally want to live my life, whether that relates to health, the way I take care of my health, the way that I enrich my life, through hobbies or other things that fuel my life. So you can think about different domains, but I encourage you, we're going to go through a little exercise now that I hope might be helpful. I'm going to try to figure out how to share my screen. Just give me 1 second here. Grace, can you see my screen? Okay, great. So this is just a little action item for us today. So, you might not have been able to really think through. I'm moving kind of quickly. So after this is over, take a moment and think about that 80th birthday and maybe jot down a few things that come to mind. 1 thing, 2 things, 5 things, whatever comes to you. And so I'm going to review 10 steps to trying on a value. So, not only do we want to connect with our values, but we want them to help us and serve as some kind of direction for us. And the idea is that values are different than goals. A goal is something you kind of check off the list, done, I did it. Whereas a value is like a compass. It gives you direction it's enduring. It goes on and on. It's not kind of something that you can check off. It's how you live your life every day. So let's just say one of my values, especially right now during quarantine, is that I really want to try to be a present parent. I want to be, involved and present with my kids, even though I'm pulled in a lot of directions and I have my own emotions that I'm dealing with right now. And, there's so many things that are getting in the way of me being present. So let's just say that's, for an example, I'm going to choose that value. And then I'm also going to notice how I feel about it. Like, what are my reactions? And I'm noticing that I feel a little bit anxious because what's very conscious for me right now is how many things are competing right now that I'm trying to manage all at once. So I feel a little bit anxious about my ability to really follow through on this. Then I'm going to make a list. So making a list means that, what are some ways that I'm going to be showing my presence to my kids? So that might be, I sit with them and I do the math homework with them, or maybe I'm going to play Uno with my son, or I'm going to someone gave me this thing, try to sit with your kids without doing anything for 15 minutes a day, just one-on-one, just sitting there. So I'm going to make a list of all the things I can do. And then I'm going to choose one because I'm going to try to be realistic. I know I'm not going to do all of those things. So I'm going to make a list of the things that I'd like to do. And then I'm going to choose a behavior. So maybe my behavior that I'm going to choose is that I'm going to play Uno with Owen. I'm going to notice any judgments about myself that I'm having or about engaging with that. So a judgment might be, well, that doesn't seem like the best use of time considering you have 15,000 things on your list to do today. Or, Melissa, come on, like you're not going to do it. I know you failed this before, or whatever it may be. Then I'm going to make a plan, a very clear plan for when am I going to do it? What's going to happen? Where's my daughter going to be when I'm getting my alone time with my son? What tools do I need in order to achieve this activity that I'm setting for myself? So I'm trying to be very logistic. You work out all the logistics, very concrete about the logistics. Just behave. So I'm going to kind of, even if I'm feeling conflicted or I'm not feeling ready or I'm distracted, I'm actually just going to do it. I'm going to make that commitment that I'm going to play Uno with Owen. And I might be distracted. And when I do, it's okay. I'm going to just keep shifting myself back to my value, which is I really want to be a present parent. And then one thing to do, if this is something that I'm going to be working on for a few days, is to keep a little diary of it. What was my reaction? How did it make me feel to do it? And my guess is that if I sit down and I have a really fun game of Uno with my son and he feels good about the time we spent together, my guess is I'm probably going to feel good about it. I have a feeling I'll have some positive feelings about it. I'll have positive feelings about myself that I followed through on something. And so the idea would be to really keep note. I mean, definitely keep note of any positive reactions that you have from taking this kind of action. Commit is something that we kind of talked about early on, but part of making the plan is really making the commitment for myself. So now that I've sort of isolated this value, this feels really important. I really need to work on thinking about, what are my barriers to doing this? And how am I going to work through any barriers so that I can benefit from the good feelings I anticipate I'm going to have from following through. And then reflecting is really about, as you begin to do this exercise and you look at your diary of reactions, to think about it more and see, did you find this successful? Was it helpful? What was it like to be present in that way? And might you think about some ways to expand on this value so that you're generating more of these positive experiences for yourself? So, what you might, and I don't expect anybody to remember all of this. If you can watch this video again, we tape everything. Everything comes up on the My Three Square website, and also soon to be also on the Columbus Park website. Feel free to take a little snapshot of this. I think without question, though, the most important piece of this is just trying to think about your values and what's really important to you. And most likely as you do that, you're probably not going to be thinking as much about eating or weight related concerns. So Grace, let me get back to you so I can see us again. Okay, stop share. There we go. Grace, I don't want to put you on the spot, but can you think of a value that comes into mind to you right now that that maybe you want to focus on and perhaps commit to some kind of action on this day that would be in line with that value, in the hopes that it could generate some of those positive feelings and be a springboard for continued action in line with your values?
Yeah, I think that one of my values is the importance of being like a present and attentive person, particularly with colleagues and particularly as a manager. And I'm not always good at that when I'm really busy. I'm like doing 3 things at once and not always good at it. So I think today I would really like to remember that that's important to me and show up present and not distracted to the people I work with and the people I love.
And so let's do this exercise together. So can you share with me more clearly, what does it look like when you're present? What are your behaviors that show your presence?
I'm looking at, in this case, the screen, right?
Yeah.
I'm looking at people's faces. I'm not also writing email while I'm on a meeting, or I'm not also writing notes. It looks like eye contact, and not multitasking when I'm having one-on-one time. Yeah.
Those are some good things. What are some potential blockers for you taking this action today?
I'm not looking at my calendar right now, but I often have a lot of back-to-back meetings.
Yeah.
And so if one runs over, I end up late to the next one and trying to get things done in between. So that's definitely a potential barrier.
So then what I might suggest is, with whatever is within your control, is there anything in your environment, in your experience today, that you can change to address those blockers? So one thing, I mean, I get meetings will sometimes go over, but if you notice that that's a blocker because then you enter your team meeting more distracted or still with a hangover from the last meeting, might you be able to begin your prior meeting, for example, with, guys, I have a hard stop at 12 o'clock. I'm going to keep an eye today. Because I'm connecting with this a lot. Your experience, for me, a big blocker to being present is when I get harried and I can't. So, so this is just an example of something within your control that you can do. So what we're doing together is we're identifying some things that might get in the way of you living by your values. And so we're troubleshooting. We're kind of doing some problem solving to plan ahead so that you're more likely to have like a good feeling and to feel successful in your efforts. And then also being really explicit about what it looks like when you're present, so that you really know what you're working toward. And then maybe what you could do is, after your meeting with your team where you are, very, very present, making eye contact, not doing anything else, maybe your phone is off, maybe make a quick note about what it felt like to you. And what was the reaction of the people around you? Like, what was the impact on your environment when you took that action in that way? And how does that make you feel? And then what can you take with you for the next day after today?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So I'm totally going to work on this today. You've got your work cut out for you too. Folks out there, I hope that there's something that you're connecting with in this dialogue. And I definitely hope to see you all tomorrow for our continued Project HEAL week. It's great to see everybody today. I hope you have a good day.